Leaders should create space for intelligent disobedience. Let me explain why. Purebred dogs are broadly divided into three categories based on their purpose. First are companion dogs, which are bred primarily for companionship. Second are working dogs like sniffers, guard dogs, search and rescue, and military combat dogs. But the highest caliber of dogs are those which are specifically taught not to be 100% obedient. As a matter of fact, they are trained to practice what is called intelligent disobedience. As some of you might have guessed, these are seeing eye dogs which guide the blind and therefore need to be trained to disobey orders that could endanger their master's safety. Let's say if their master insists on crossing a road where a silent EV is hurtling towards their way. All cultures teach children to obey authority, and yet it is also essential to educate them when not to obey. A parent instructing her small daughter not to leave the room under any circumstances or to obey an uncle under all circumstances will endanger the child in those exceptional situations when she must intelligently disobey the order to save herself from, say, a fire or an accident or an inappropriate action by an adult. Organizations also must understand the importance of cultivating a culture of intelligent disobedience, especially those accustomed to an authoritative style of leadership like the military or hierarchical or differential companies. While the armed forces understandably enforce obedience ruthlessly, they still leave a provision for junior officers to disobey an unlawful order and in extreme circumstances relieve the superior officer of his command by force if necessary. But of course, like all organizational behaviors, it's not the legal provisions or the company policies that encourage intelligent disobedience. Instead, it is the culture of psychological safety which empowers a subordinate to disobey an instruction that endangers the organization or public interest. On 6th of August 1997, the Korean Airways flight 801 from Seoul were descending into Guam. Bad weather had reduced visibility, forcing an instrument landing. Captain Yong Park, a 42-year-old veteran and a decorated pilot, began his approach to a runway that was not in service, mistaking an irrelevant signal to be the landing beacon. Despite the co-pilot and the flight engineer pointing out that the airport was not visible, the beacon signal was incorrect and the descent was too steep, Park pressed on and crashed the plane 5 kilometers short of the runway, killing all the 229 passengers. The investigation found many lacunae, but what proved fatal was the fact that the first officer and the flight engineer did not challenge Park even though they knew he was wrong. Had they protested vociferously and if necessary taken over the controls, they could have saved all. A Korean culture of strict deference to hierarchy prevented them from disobeying what they knew was a fatally bad judgment. However, despite such rare instances, the aviation industry has attained remarkable levels of safety precisely because of an environment where bad orders get questioned routinely. For instance, hundreds of near-miss reports are filed every day by pilots and flight crews all over the world, which contribute to the process of improving flight safety continuously. Confirmatory checklists cross-verify commands between the flight crew to ensure that there is no miscommunication. And while aircraft manufacturers do their best to ensure flight safety and redundancies of critical systems, there is a tacit humility in admitting that despite all of this, there could be a crash, and even in failure, they would be learning. And that is why a black box is installed in every plane. There is thus psychological safety in a culture which makes it clear that even sophisticated technology could fail or seasoned pilots could be wrong, and it's okay to question what seems to be an incorrect instruction. Compare this with, say, the healthcare industry, where doctors are treated as prima donnas and it's usually sacrilege for a junior nurse to question the instruction of a senior doctor. Despite clear indication of doctor errors, fatalities are usually attributed to statistical failure rate for the procedures. Doctors purportedly never commit errors, so there's no question of near-miss reports being filed. Beyond informal conversations, there is no structured learning from those mistakes. That is probably why over 200,000 deaths are estimated every year in the US alone due to medical errors. Intelligent disobedience is not impertinent insubordination. Instead, it is a process of rigor and an early warning radar to ensure that bad decisions are nipped in the bud. Leaders can create such a culture by narrating instances when they themselves have had near misses and celebrating the interception of decisions that violate a higher purpose or violate core values. However, creating an environment in which admission of errors is considered healthy needs secure and mature leaders who are not ruffled or threatened by dissent. Leaders who appreciate that clarity of vision and decisiveness of orders must be mated with the counsel of subordinates, else they could be headed for a catastrophic crash. Importantly, subordinates aware of looming dangers must realize that their fear of immediate repercussions of disobedience are nothing in comparison with the consequences of supporting bad orders, not just for the organization, but for them personally as well. Because while the Korean Airlines survived this incident of a landing crash, the subservient flight crew of that plane did not.